Hey everyone, welcome to Shiloh Aerial Artistry Nature Journaling class. So today I decided to do a quick movie on what we painted last week actually, just to kind of get this Facebook group started up. My classes are on Zoom, but I know a few people have had trouble with Zoom, so I decided I would just live stream, or I'm going to try to live stream to Facebook at the same time. And so I just wanted to catch up those of you who wanted to do last week's class but weren't able to see one of the things we painted from last week. So this is actually an example of nature journaling, and basically what it is we've been picking like a flower or plant. So far we've done flowers from outside and bringing them in and learning about them, painting them, and writing about them. And so you can see this is a page from one of my journal pages, and I just wrote things that were unique to me that stood out about the red flowering currant. So of course I gave it its scientific name, said how tall the plants are, how wide they are, and then different descriptive things about the petals, about the leaves. Here's my color chart for the colors that I used to do this painting. And then just different unique things like when they came to be in this area, when they bloom, what the berries are used for, what they attract. Here's another page. We did the viola flower last week, and you can see, same thing. Basically, the watercolor journal is an area where you can be creative, and different people find different unique things about plants and the flowers and write what stands out to them. Like to me, I wrote down that the leaves could be eaten as a vegetable, or cooked or eaten. And here's the viola. It has some fragrance about it. It's used to decorate desserts. And of course, here's my key of my color key. So today we're gonna go ahead and paint the common dandelion. So really quick to catch those of you up who have missed the other classes, things that you're going to need are your paint palette, of course, is your paint palette. If you're able to, you can totally get some dandelions from outside. I brought a few in, and I brought some leaves in. You're going to want your water dish, an extra piece of paper. I like to use this in case I'm trying to get a particular shade. Your paintbrush, of course. Today I'm using a round size 6, and paper towel for any like little dots of water, excess paint. To get it off, you'll want your paper towel. Later on, you're going to want a pen of some sort. I like to use, this is just one of my pens from the craft store that's a fine point pen, or for example, this one, I can't get it out right now, but it's basically a fine point Sharpie. And that can be used later to write about your artwork. All right, so let's get started. Today, we're gonna do a technique called wet on wet. Wet on wet is basically applying wet paint to wet paper. Watercolor is special because it gives a translucent look, which, let's see where would be a good example. Right here, you can see how it has a bit of a translucent look to it. So with watercolor, we rarely use white paint. If we use white paint, it kind of then changes over from watercolor painting to more of a gouache painting, because instead of using wet paint, because we have that translucent look about watercolor, we will actually leave it blank, just white paper, rather than painting white paint there, because the white paint definitely gets rid of that translucent watercolor look. All right, so last week we did a wet on dry look for our painting, which is right here, wet paint on dry paper. The wet on wet is going to give us a more fuzzy look, which you can see with this. So let's go ahead and get started and go ahead and start painting the dandelion. All right, so we're gonna start with our paintbrush. And you want to make sure you have a totally clean paintbrush, which you put it in the water. And we're going to start by painting directly onto the paper, water. That's it, only water. So here I have my dandelion, and I'm going to look at it, and I'm basically going to paint the shape of it with these little rays. It's almost like a sunshine coming out. So I get water on my paintbrush, and this is barely showing up for me. I kind of need a bright light, but maybe it's showing up better for you in the camera. So I kind of just start painting around. Don't want to use too much water. We want enough water that it's going to maintain the shape. There we go. And they're kind of showing up in the camera a little bit. All right, so I forgot to mention, but before I use my paints, I like to make sure that they're kind of pre-wet, because watercolor is basically activated by water to use. So I prefer to use a spray bottle, and I just spray my paints that I'm going to use. If you don't have a spray bottle, you can just go ahead and get water on your paintbrush and then like drip that drop onto the paint. All right, so now that we have this water here, I'm going to do a dip into my yellow. And I'm going to make sure that I get yellow paint right there on the tip of my paintbrush. And I'm going to dot it on to where the water is. And you can see it's just totally going with the flow of water. And that is one thing that is so cool with this wet on wet style, because the paint will literally just go with that flow of water, which can make it kind of interesting, because depending on where your water is, your paint's just going to go there, and sometimes it leaks onto another color, which is totally okay. It kind of can be part of the style that you're doing. Okay, I'm just getting a little bit more yellow there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm starting to kind of like spread out my petals. I just want them to be a little bit more distinct, that it's not just a blob of yellow, but they're kind of like springing out. So I'm going to kind of pull the water a little bit and figure out where I want my little things to go, my little petals. There we go. All right, so let's go ahead and do the leaves and stem now. So I take my paintbrush, and unfortunately my dish isn't yellow, so you can't really see well, but I'm going to be dabbing my paintbrush on the bottom of this, mixing it up with water and making sure I get all that water out. Actually, I forgot to mention, before this, where's my paintbrush? I want to go ahead and make a color chart. So because we use yellow, I'm going to go ahead and take some of my yellow paint and decide where on your paper you want your color chart. I think I'm going to put mine right up here in the corner, and I'm just going to make a little line of yellow. And later I'll write down that those are the colors I used for this. All right, so go ahead, clean off your paintbrush, and take this and I dot it onto my paper towel to make sure there's no shade of color in that at all. All right, so now I'm gonna go ahead and get some more water on my brush, and we're going to paint the leaves that are hanging off of the dandelion right here, as well as the stem. So you can see how some leaves go up and then some leaves hang down. So I'm going to do the leaves that are hanging down as well as the stem, which I just already said. So I got some paint on my paintbrush, and I'm just going to start, oopsie, I dropped my paintbrush. There we go. I got some paint on my paintbrush, and I'm going to start just drawing these lines. There, coming down. And you can see some of my yellow started to mix into there. And then I'm going to draw my stem, which you can barely see in the camera right now. There we go. All right, now I'm going to pick my green that I want to use. And this green is kind of a lighter green, so I'm going to go with my sap green over here. And remember, when you're mixing paints, that you want to take your paint from like the paint dish and mix it over here. You don't want to like take a yellow and mix it directly into your paint, because you're going to run out of paint very quickly if you're doing that. So I'm going to dip some water and take some of my sap green and put it over here. And I'm just going to go straight sap green. I like my sap green. It kind of definitely already has that green that would be appropriate for stems and leaves. So I'm going to dot it in here where I put those leaves. I might add a few leaves just because I think I need some more. All right, I'm gonna make these a little longer, kind of fanning them out a bit. There we go. There, and now I'm going to do my stem. All right, so where'd the stem go? My watery stem is kind of disappearing, so I might need to put some more water down. There we go. And now dot my green on it to it. Let just go with the flow of the water. There it is. You can see it moving with the flow of water. There we go. Dot a little bit more green onto there. There we go. And if you need it to be darker, just get more paint on your paintbrush and you can increase the intensity of the color. All right, so one thing I've noticed with stems often, not all the time, but sometimes as we're looking at this dandelion, I don't know how well the camera is picking that up, but maybe you can see it too, or if you have a dandelion at home right now, look at your stem. You're going to see some purple in there. So there's two ways you can do this. Either you can go ahead and use a purple paint if you have one. If not, mix some red and blue together, which I've already done right here. This purple is a shade that I really like that I mixed blue and red together. I used a little bit more red to give it this tint. Here I have it on a piece of paper so you can see closer. So I like to use this color for stems if I decided they need a little purple touch to them. You could also get this tint if you want to mix like a purple with some red. It just gives it more of a red purple than a blue purple. So I'm going to dip just the tip of my paintbrush, this itty bitty tip, into this purple. And if you think you have, you think you have too much, that's when you want to like tap it on your paper or your paper towel. And now I'm going to just put it into there, and my stem is already still wet, so there. And sometimes I just spread it around a little bit. Don't want it to be so intense that it's like purple stem. I just want to have it there just like it's on the actual stem. All right, so we're gonna leave our flower there now and move on to doing the leaf. All right, so one thing that I think is super cool about dandelions is that dandelions, we often see them outside and we think they're just a weed. You know, they grow everywhere. They'll even be like in parking lots, like growing amongst rocks. Dandelions are everywhere, and when we see them, we think they're a weed. They're basically pretty much known as weeds, but they actually have a ton of benefits to them. I have a list right here of some of the benefits. They've actually been used over the centuries to help in areas like with cancer, acne, liver disease, digestive orders, and so on. Not only is the flower itself used, but often the leaves are used too. And leaves you are probably familiar with because they're often in salads. There's another one. This one is kind of wilting on me. Give it some water. They're also known to have vitamin A, C, K, vitamin E, and even small amounts of B vitamins in there. So let's see. We're going to go ahead and do the leaf now. So here I have the leaf, and I was talking to the kids the other day, and the leaves almost remind me of shark teeth if we're looking at them sideways. It's almost like we have like teeth sticking out here. Here's another one. This one's wilting too. They don't like the hot weather, obviously. They need water. So we're going to go ahead and use this leaf as an example today. And they almost have triangles. So I'm going to count this as 1 triangle, 2 triangle, 3 triangle, and then we have the stem. So I'm going to go ahead and with our wet on wet technique, which I've made sure that I don't have any more paint on my brush. And don't forget, I always forget, but don't forget your color chart or your color key up here. Here is the green I use for the stem of the dandelion right there. And not to be left out, but I use some purple too. And so we're going to give the purple a little bit of a square right here of what colors were used. All right, so we're going to go ahead. I'm going to do a triangle here. And then I'm going to do another triangle and another triangle. with only water, of course, to make our leaf right here. So kind of shape it in a little bit of a circular triangle almost. How you can see this one's almost like a triangle with like a hill. Sometimes if we think of a shape that we're familiar with, it'll help us paint it. So there we go, with water, of course. And then underneath that, I'm going to do another triangle. And another one underneath that one. And then they kind of just come down here into the stem. All right, so now I'm gonna go ahead and use my green. I'm going to darken my green up a bit because you can see the leaf is a little darker than the stem. So I'm gonna use this green I have over here, and I'm gonna mix it into my lighter green. And then once I get that on the tip, I'm just gonna start dabbing onto my water here. So. And that is just kind of going on its own with the flow of the water, obviously. So I'm still looking at my leaf for an example, obviously. I'm just trying to maintain that shape with watercolor. There. It's kind of hard when you're doing wet on wet and you can't see the actual water anymore. I think my lighting in this room is just kind of not great. Okay, there, and kind of bring that down. And you can totally see with my leaf a very fuzzy look, which is totally okay. That's just the style. Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and add a little bit more green just for a little bit of a darker intensity to this leaf. Pulling out kind of like the little teeth marks on the leaf. All right. There we go. Letting this green kind of go where it wants, the intensity of it all. Still just dotting it on. And of course we have a stem right here. All right, so if you ever have a question about what color I'm using, because I don't have all my color names memorized except for like sap green and my opera rose. But if there's ever a color that you're like, want to know the exact color name, let me know and I'll look it up for you. Most of my paints are Winsor Newton, except for my two paints over here are a French brand, and they're honey based, which is pretty cool. I love my honey based paints. There we go. All right, so I'm gonna let that start to dry. And while that starts to dry, I'm going to figure out how I want to paint my line right here, the vein of the leaf. And there's so many different options you can do with that because it's kind of like another shade of green. So I was telling my students last week that they could use like a yellow. They could go for the gouache and do some white. You could use a lighter green. I personally am going to use a lime green. And okay, so I know I just told everyone not to mix right into your paint container-y thing here, but this is the only area that I do that. This is a yellow that I'm not too fond of, and so I actually use this yellow only for mixing greens, and so that is why it is totally a mess, because I mix my greens straight in with this yellow. Other than that, don't do that. All right, so once I make sure that I got the shade I like, I have that on the tip, and I'm just gonna right away, because I'm going for that wet on wet fuzzy look, I'm just gonna go ahead and just do a line straight through, and it's probably gonna spread a bit with the water, but that's okay to me. So There it is. It's actually not coming up very good, so I'm just gonna get some more paint on my brush. Get kind of a thicker look. There we go. All right, so there it is. And I'm just gonna paint straight down, and then you can see it's kind of spreading out, and that's okay. But anyways, there we go. And then I'm just gonna let it dry like that. I like that look a lot. Kind of see how it's kind of there and kind of not. And often the paint will dry a little bit lighter, depending on how dark you get it on, but it will dry lighter. Okay, so washing off my paintbrush again. Oh, and don't forget, I clearly forgot again. I'm going to go ahead and get my green that I used for my leaf right here, with my color key. And then also my lime green that I used right here. All right, now I'm gonna look closer at this leaf. Now these leaves don't seem to have very much of a purple tint to them at all. Some of the leaves that I picked the other day, or somebody picked for me the other day, did seem to have the purple. So that's up to you if you want to put like just a little bit of purple into your stem. Let's see, maybe here, there. Let's see, you can't see that. And kind of mix it in with the water. There we go. That's what I'm going to do today. All right, so there we have our dandelion. And then from here, I let this totally dry before I do any of my writing, but I'm definitely going to write above it with a Sharpie that this is the common dandelion. And then I'm gonna write like, some cool stuff about it, like dandelions can help reduce your cholesterol. They help with blood sugar. They can get rid of inflammation, lower blood pressure. They help with weight loss, reducing cancer risks, boosting your immune system. They help with digestion. They keep your skin healthy. Basically, there's a lot of crazy, amazing things that what we would typically look at as a weed. So as soon as this dries, I'm going to go ahead and write about it and, of course, date it. So I'm going to encourage you all to do that, and go ahead too and either text me a photo or post a photo of your dandelion, because I'd love to see what you do with your nature journal. I'm going to really quick turn a page and just we'll definitely be sharing some more pictures of the nature journal. So as you can see, once again, that I wrote the color key up here, and then always remember to have the name of the flower or whatever you're doing nature journaling wise. I like to include the scientific name because that's kind of cool to have that information. Describe your leaves, describe the petals. Last week we talked about how the viola's petals seem to be kind of like a velvet, a dark purple, and the leaves, or these white petals, were kind of like a creamy white petals, and they had a splash of purple and bright yellow in the middle. So with the dandelion, last week on our Zoom class, we talked about different things that reminded us of the dandelion, like a sunshine. Somebody else told me that this reminded them of mustard. So when you're writing your nature journal, write what you think of when you look at the dandelion. So the leaves, shark teeth is pretty much what we came up with. Triangles, or they can even look like mountains. Another option too is once your flower is complete, you can leave it just like this, or sometimes depending on the style, I like to outline, which is what I decided to do with my viola over here. I outlined the leaf, and I also outlined the flower. But my red currant, you can see I didn't do any outlining. I just left it totally watercolor with no outlining. All right, so I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. Go ahead and go ahead and complete your watercolor journal as soon as it's dry. And don't forget to send me a picture of your completed dandelion. I'm so looking forward to seeing how you decide to get artsy and get creative with your watercolor journal page. All right, hope you enjoyed. Bye-bye.